you can certainly unmute and speak. There's also in the upper right-hand corner, there is a chat feature in there. And if you click on the chat feature, you can type in if you have a question or a comment. And Natasha Granis here is going to help manage that chat feature. So if there's questions in there, she's going to help me see those. And also at the top towards the left, you should see an option to raise your hand. So if you would like to provide a comment and there's some discussion going on, feel free to raise your hand, and then we'll call on you and we can comment that way. So I have an introductory statement and question, and then we're going to open this up and look to get some really quality feedback today. So let me start. Portland Public Schools has a long-range plan to modernize and rebuild Portland schools. The best way to comprehensively address outdated school buildings that weren't built for current health and safety codes or modern educational needs. 2 previous voter-approved bonds have funded modernization or rebuilding of 6 high schools. Franklin, Grant, and Roosevelt are complete. Benson, Lincoln, and Madison high schools are in progress. In addition, Fabian Pre-K-8 in Northeast Portland was fully rebuilt, and a new Kellogg Middle School in Southeast Portland is under construction. So with that in mind, and if people had seen some of the options that are put forward for a potential November 2020 bond, what should the PPS Board of Education prioritize as they decide on a proposed bond renewal package for voters' consideration?
This is the part where we talk back to you?
This is the point. We're playing silent game. Luke, if you would like to provide comments. Maybe
So,
I'll ask. Sorry, go ahead.
Just logistically, as far as I understand, of the 3 that haven't been on a bond yet, Cleveland, Jefferson, and Wilson, Cleveland is the only one that would need to swing to the Marshall site during the reconstruction of those high schools. And so, in my opinion, just purely from a logistical lens, it would make sense to do Benson at Marshall and then Cleveland at Marshall, and then do Jefferson and Wilson on site. I guess if somebody's going to say something to start, that's my piece.
Okay, I appreciate that. Is there any comments on the sequencing of starting with Cleveland High School versus other high schools? It looks like we might have Ms. Cohen. Ms. Cohen, I believe you are muted. At the bottom there, if you're having trouble finding it, there should be a little microphone that if you click on, you should be able to unmute. All right, I'll let.
So hi, Tamara Hickok with Self Enhancement. So I was a part of the CPMG, I think that's what I remember the initials, for the whole redesign for Jefferson. And I don't recall that in that meeting that we were talking about a redesign for Jefferson way off. This was talking about a future plan coming up soon. And in your list, in your original list that you named off schools, Jefferson wasn't in that list just now. So I'm just wondering, is it Jefferson getting pushed back off the list, or there's an afterthought or whatever? Because we spent, that was like eight evenings that group of the partners came together, and we worked hard on different ideas as far as what's important to the community, what's the thought process behind building, what would be the thing to build the school around as far as the heritage, the community, and all these different things. I guess I'm confused on how at this point right now it's not even one of the top schools we're talking about redoing.
Yeah, that is a great question. So a little context for everyone. As a part of actually the 2017 bond, one of the scopes of work was to do conceptual master plans for the three high schools that had not yet been a part of a bond. So that was Jefferson High School, Cleveland High School, and Wilson High School. So all three of those schools went through a fairly high level effort of taking a look at, if we were to modernize those schools, what might that look like? So what might the layout of the schools be? What might the school look like a little bit? Laying out the grounds, and then getting a cost estimate of what the pricing would be and budget would be for those schools. So all three of those are options that are potential for a November 2020 bond. What the survey is looking at now is 3 specific bond package options. And what I'm going to do for this group is see if I can't present and quickly show you those options and walk through them. Okay, if you cannot see my screen, please yell at me. So this is a document that's on our website, and I certainly won't read it all. But what it highlights are 3 options that the district is getting feedback on. And when I say 3 options, it's not a pick 1, 2, or 3. It's just 3 different options to get some feedback from the community. One of the options is this one you see in front of you here for $548 million. All of the options, including this one, include educational improvements such as technology upgrades, curriculum upgrades, and improvements to our special ed classrooms, health and safety updates, including roof, mechanical, security upgrades, and others, and funds to finish the modernization and rebuild of the Benson High School project, including the multiple pathways building that is on the Benson campus. So we look at those as one project. So option number 1 is the smallest dollar amount option at $548 million. Option number 2 is substantially similar to option number 1. It has some more of the educational improvements and health and safety projects, and also includes funding to do planning and design of those 3 high schools that have yet to be approved and funded for full modernization. So again, that's Jefferson, Cleveland, and Wilson. What that would do is put some significant funds to furthering the design of those in anticipation of another bond in the future that would pay for the construction. And the final option is the largest at $1 billion, is substantially similar to number 2, except it includes funds to complete Jefferson High School now. So the completion of construction would be included in the 2020 bond if this option or an option similar to this were selected. So I hope that answers, Tamara, a little bit of your question about the timing of Justin and where that it could be in the 2020 bond, of course, if that is the option or substantially similar that is put forward by the board.
It does answer part of my question, but I'm hoping that the exposure of this information can go beyond this room, because I think about the recruitment for people to participate in that conceptualization group. And I remember that it was the reach out was not very broad. I remember there was a lot of students who wanted to participate and didn't get a chance to because they said they didn't know. We had a couple of community members who came because they heard at the last minute, but just saying that there was not enough outreach done to get opinions in and have people speak on behalf of Jefferson at that moment and what they thought the design would look like. And so if that comes down to, if this whole modernization comes down to people's opinion and people being aware of it, I just hope that we make sure that PPS does the work to do the outreach to get the amount of voices that are needed to speak on behalf of Jefferson.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And that was a part of the process that we definitely heard, that there needed to be more outreach. There needs to be more community engagement. and helping for that vision and design of Jefferson High School. If this, as an example, if this option goes forward as is and Jefferson is included in the bond, there will be a more robust engagement process that will happen with community and stakeholders before the project moves into the formal design phases. So we definitely want to have more of those conversations, but appreciate that feedback. Any other thoughts about this, since it's on the screen, this option number 3, or any of the other options, but is there any initial feedback or sort of visceral response?
Dan, there's a comment in the chat if you want to open that up and possibly read that out loud and or respond.
Let's do that. I will stop sharing. Looks like we have a question here. When the bonds were first, I think it's put to the public for support, we were told the high schools would be first because it impacts the largest percentage of students at once. Has this changed? If it has, how? Can you explain the option choice, how the option choice will be made? If it's possible, Jefferson and the remaining high schools may not be in the November bond at all. That is a great question. I'll try to make it as short of an answer as possible. The district has a long-range facilities plan document, and that was first adopted in 2012. And that document shows and lays out this plan for a multi-decade, multi-billion-dollar capital program and how that might work. It doesn't go into a ton of detail, but it does say that the focus would start with modernizing the high schools. So that's kind of like a guidance document. What happens when we come forward with general obligation bonds, that is one of the documents that guides the district and guides leadership and the board about how to decide what scope will go into the bond. But it does not commit specific schools or specific amounts. So what this process does here is we take a number of things into account when we're deciding on what goes into a bond. What are our guiding documents? What criteria have we used in the past? What are current needs? We look at educational needs, we look at facility needs, but also this community input. What is the community saying that they're valuing? So we have all this historical data, and now is the time when we put forward a general obligation bond. Do we continue down that path, or is there a reason to deviate from that? So I certainly appreciate bringing that forward, saying this is what the path has been. So that's the question that's in front of the district is, do we continue down that path, or is there a reason to deviate from that? And would love to hear some comments of, does that seem like the right path? Just stick with the high schools, or is there something else compelling or a reason that we would want to go down a different path?
May I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so having been around a former PPS student, current PPS parent of 2 Jefferson High School students, my frustration is that John Isaacs back in 2012 had told me specifically that Jefferson would be on the bond, and it wasn't. And then we were told it would be on the next bond, and it wasn't. And now I have some fear that I'm being told again that there's a possibility it won't be on the bond. So my youngest, who wasn't even in school at the time, who is now an incoming rising 6th grader at Ockley, may never have a high school. Part of my other concern is that I was told by many people at the district that the only way Jefferson would get on the bond is if it was placed on the bond at the time with Lincoln High School. So my concern is what confidence do you have that Jefferson will be on a bond and that it will pass? It just seems like a more affluent schools keep going on the bonds. And I wonder if you're looking at this through an equity lens and the impact of the students. And my daughter, who also goes to Jefferson, is sitting with me listening to this.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I'd love to hear what are other people's impressions about how decisions are made around the scope of work and what you would like to see in an upcoming bond.
My visceral reaction to that was that there is no choice but option 3 that includes the rebuild of Jefferson.
Great. Any other thoughts? Looking at the options.
Yeah, hi. I have just some quick input. Just as far as I'm here with self-enhancement, just as far as like community-wise, I think it's just kind of obvious that being able to commit to Jefferson would really just kind of build this trust in this community that, you know, people care about us, not only in the community, but the students as well. You know, Jefferson is a great high school and it can compete with other schools because, you know, we have the middle college. And yeah, I think like now more than ever, people need to feel unified and like we do need to look at it through an equity lens. You know, these students have, it's not only community members that have heard that this has been, you know, on the bond for so many years, but students know that as well. And being able to instill trust in those students, as many of us know, being, you know, educators is huge and it goes a really long way. And I think that that's something to really, really strongly consider, yeah, as we make decisions moving forward.
Are there other comments or impressions about some of the other scope? I think we're hearing pretty strongly Jefferson is an important or the critical scope for the board to consider putting in the November bond. Are there other scopes that that you feel strongly about that might be prioritized? Whether that be the educational improvements with technology improvements? We're in a virtual learning environment that is new. This is highlighted to staff in the district that there's a need there for upgrading our technology. Similarly, our curriculum, much of our curriculum is outdated. This is an opportunity to take one bite at the apple and very quickly update our curriculum district-wide. Does that resonate with anyone here?
Yeah, if I could take a second. My name is Paul. I'm with the Carpenters Union, and I would really like to see more hands-on learning for the students. You know, expanded CTE programs, STEM programs, you know, manufacturing, building, things like that. You know, there's lots of information out there that when students get their hands working, their hands on things, and they're not just looking at a book or a screen all day, that they have an enhanced learning environment. And I think we need to look at that and expand the spaces where they can do that kind of education. And another quick thought is thinking about attaching a community benefits agreement to this work so that there's hard goals for women and people of color to have opportunities to build these buildings and work in this field and earn living wages and have full family benefits. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Natasha, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, just a quick time check. I don't know. You guys are definitely more than welcome to stay in this room, but at 7 o'clock in about 10 minutes, the other rooms will be available.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kara Stoudemire Phillips, just community member, and I put my question in the chat, but just wanted to bring it forward here. What is the timeline for the board vote on these three options, just so we have some clarification around what we're working with here?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's coming up rapidly. Effectively, it will need to be made in the month of July, a decision about what the scope of work is. Where there's going to be a couple meetings, board meetings, work sessions, and board meetings that are going to be scheduled in July. I think we're targeting July 28th for the referral vote, but don't hold me to that. But it is coming up rapidly. Oh, I'm getting a yes, July 28th.
I can affirm that, Dan.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So you'll let us, so we're going to find out what is going to be the sequence moving forward as far as what meetings are going to be taking place, just so this is not the last of this discussion.
Sure. There will be a work session. I don't believe the date is confirmed. It'll be the week after next is what we're looking at. So there will be another work session where there is discussion. There could be even more, but then July 28th is the target for referral for the board to approve the scope.
Thank you.
Dan,
Hey,
is it
Dan.
possible?
Oh, sorry, Julia. I just wanted to jump in back to Phil's question about a community benefits agreements. And I just wanted to make sure people knew that PPS has signed on to the Construction to Careers Pathways project, which is a regional collaborative specifically focusing on getting women and people of color into the trades. And so those standards will be adopted with projects moving forward. So
I was just going to add, Dan, I don't know if it's possible to drop the survey link into the chat. So if people haven't filled out the survey, because that would be another way to provide feedback or to circulate with people who, for example, couldn't come to tonight's meeting, a way for people to sort of share their priorities and what we should do. We've had about 1,000 respondents already, but certainly, you know, that's another way for people if they don't want to come to a meeting or can't for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, that's great. Natasha, do you mind going to our website and grabbing that survey link and pasting it in here?
I don't mind at all. Just give me a few minutes. I have to find it.
No worries. It is on our website. If you go to pps.net, one of the first things that'll pop up there will be a banner about the bond, and you can click there and get to the survey. If I may, Nicole, I think I maybe saw you reacting a little bit to some of the scopes when we were walking through. Did you have any comments or thoughts on that?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
I have a lot of feelings. I'm trying to listen.
Absolutely.
I do have a lot of thoughts and feelings about all of that. Yes.
Okay.
I'll let you know when I want to say them out loud.
Absolutely. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions about the potential health and safety scope in there? So what we're looking at as priorities for the facility improvements include roof replacements, mechanical, so heating and cooling system upgrades, seismic improvements, new security upgrades as well, and accessibility. So are there any thoughts or ideas about how those could or should be prioritized?
I guess I would just chime in and say if some of those can be prioritized in a way where it brings the costs of running the building down to where that money can be spent in enhancing the experience of the students, that's got to be something that should be a priority. If we can get more efficient equipment to run the facilities and then put that money to where the students really get a much better experience, you're going to have more engaged students, you're going to have higher graduation rates, and we can really start to uplift our students in this time.
Yeah, that's great. Reducing operational costs is certainly an important objective. What about accessibility improvements to schools? Outside our newer schools, few of them fully comply with ADA and accessibility requirements, including ramps, elevators. Does that resonate with this group?
Hi. So I'm Amanda. I'm a counselor at Cleveland High School, and what I just heard from Paul really resonates, because my understanding of our school is that, number one, our HVAC system is really awful, and a lot of money is spent attempting to continue to have it hobble along. And so I do think it would probably it would make sense in the long run to fix it. And I don't know that what I've understood is the case is we don't invest money in our school right now because we're going to be rebuilding it at some point. In the meantime, our accessibility is really poor. for students or faculty members who are not able to negotiate the space. It's it's something that I notice a lot for both adults and students in the building, that it's very challenging to even get in, and certainly to get around the building in the current I guess in the current state of the building. So I guess I would just advocate for all of the high schools to have that updating, because I worry that if we have a building that someday is going to be fixed, that in the meantime, the safety in terms of earthquake, and certainly in terms of accessibility and heat and everything else, is just kind of like waiting for the rebuild.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for those comments. Time check, we have just a couple of minutes left. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Dan,
Ms. Cohen, yes.
I'm connected. It was the browser. Don't use Edge. It was the Edge browser. So I live in St. John's. I just want to point out that the Roosevelt build was not completed because it was planned for fewer students than all of the other comprehensive high schools, and as you know, planned for hundreds fewer than what we are having and will have in the next year or two. And we are going to need a whole additional building for those classrooms. So that's one really important thing. And then, of course, the other thing was that we fought to have a proper STEM facility. And in 2016, the board authorized a building that is now being built that was supposed to be half of it for STEM. But again, because of the tremendous classroom shortage we have, PPS is taking the STEM space from that building to use for classrooms. So although we have a small space that's going to be used, in the long run, when we get the additional classroom building, which needs to be in the bond, we also need to plan to finally have the proper STEM space that we fought for. So we can't ignore these lacks. We don't want to keep doing remodels and have them be insufficient, and then turn around and say, well, we're done with you now. I mean, Roosevelt is a school that is, of all the comprehensive high schools, the most diverse and possibly the lowest income. And PPS talks a good talk about equity, and yet Roosevelt has been neglected. That's been acknowledged. We need to correct that, and it needs to be corrected in the bond if you want the support of the community.
Thank you for that. And Donna, I think I'll let you have the last word on this session. I think we're going to start a new session. So if everyone has a minute or two to switch rooms if they would like, feel free to do that now. Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone. It looks like we've got quite a few new people for our second group. Just a quick refresh, you've probably heard this before. There's a couple ways to provide comments. Certainly you can just unmute anytime and let us know what your comments are. The Google Meeting also has a chat feature. So up at the right-hand corner, you'll see what looks like a little talk box from a cartoon or something. That if you click on there, you can type in a comment or question. Natasha Granis, who is online, she's going to be monitoring that for me. And so if there's a question or a comment, she's going to help point that out to the group. Also, near the top left, you'll see a person with their hand raised. That's an option. If you click on that, you can raise your hand. I will see it. And then if you have your hand raised, we'll call on you if there's other people talking at the time. So appreciate everyone being here. We're very much looking forward to your feedback on this potential bond package. I have a little opening statement that some of you heard already, but you'll get to hear it again. And then happy to answer questions or take the feedback that you might have. So Portland Public Schools has a long-range plan to modernize and rebuild Portland schools. The best way to comprehensively address outdated school buildings that weren't built for current health and safety codes or modern educational needs is to modernize, fully modernize those structures. 2 previous voter-approved bonds have funded modernization or rebuilding of 6 high schools. Franklin, Grant, and Roosevelt are complete. Benson, Lincoln, and Madison high schools are in progress. In addition, Fabian Pre-K-8 in Northeast Portland was fully rebuilt several years ago, and a new Kellogg Middle School in Southeast Portland is currently under construction and will be open for fall of 2021. So here's the first question. It's the bigger question. What should the PPS Board of Education prioritize as they decide on a proposed bond renewal package for voters to consider? So I'll stop there. So if anyone has any comments ready to go, we are happy to hear them. And again, you can just speak up if you'd like, or use the chat feature, or raise your hand. Okay, hearing no initial comments, what I'll do is I'll share in the survey that is live right now. We've shown 3 potential options for a bond. So what I'll do, these are just potential options. That doesn't mean that these are the only 3 options. Let me share my screen and I will briefly walk through those options to see if there's any feedback. Okay. Everyone can see my screen. So let me that you can't see. This is a document that's on our website, and it's 4 pages and it's got a lot of words, so I'm not going to read it to you by any means. But the meat and potatoes of it is it shows 3 options for a potential bond in November, a small, medium, and large, if you will. All of the options include funds to complete the Benson High School project that is currently underway, including the Multiple Pathways building, which is its own separate building, but also on the Benson campus. All of the options include some level of educational improvements. Specifically, what we classify under educational are technology improvements, curriculum, it's a new curriculum for the classrooms, and special ed classroom upgrades. They all also include health and safety project improvements, specifically roof replacements, which is a big need in the district, mechanical system upgrades, so heating and cooling, either replacements or fixes, that is another large need in the district, security upgrades throughout the district, seismic improvements at some schools, and ADA or accessibilities at schools as well. So option number 1, which totals $584 million, includes all of those improvements. Option number 2, the middle of the road, also is similar, includes all those improvements, but really includes more of the improvements. So more of the health and safety, being able to get more roof done, more mechanical systems upgraded. It also includes design and construction for the 3 high schools that have yet to be in a bond. And those high schools are Jefferson, Cleveland, and Wilson. So what this option as developed here proposes is spending $62 million, so a significant amount of funds to design those schools, with the anticipation that the next bond will include the construction to complete those schools. And option number 3, the largest one at $1 billion, is very similar to the second option, including that it has planning and design funds for Cleveland and Wilson High School, but also includes funds to fully complete, so the design and construction of Jefferson High School in this bond. That is the primary difference between that one. So those are the 3 that we're looking for feedback on at the moment. Again, those aren't the only 3. Those are just 3 to get some feedback on. So now that people have seen those, if you hadn't seen them before, and got a very quick primer on them, are there any thoughts, comments, clear priorities, visceral reactions to any one of those?
I'd like to say something. My name is Eliana Machuca. I'm from Jefferson High School. I'm actually sitting here with an infant, so I might get a little crazy. But I guess I just want to say I think it's really important that Jefferson is fully rebuilt. Teaching there for the past 6 years, and then also being part of the conversations last year with the bonds, sort of like visioning sessions, and then trying to engage with students in my classroom around it. Students felt very much like, are you serious, Ms. Pachuca? They're not going to fund us. They don't do this. It's not going to happen. So there's a sense from Jefferson students that the district does not prioritize or care about them, being a predominantly African-American high school. And I think they have internalized this feeling. And I think it is so important because Jefferson has been neglected for so long. And has been passed up over time, where they feel like they're one of the oldest schools, and why are they being passed up time and time again to yet again kind of kick it down the road, I think just confirms what they're feeling. And I think it really is the time to fully invest in Jefferson High School. Looking at the comments just in the few minutes that we've started, it seems like that is resonating with people. So I do want to say that, like, not only is it resonating here, but from a teacher and experience in the classrooms, like, students really want it, but they're afraid to even believe in it. And so I think that's something, and trying to engage them, trying to let them, and having them come into the process. That's kind of where they're standing. And they believe that it needs to happen, but they don't believe that the district would do it. And that's breaks my heart for them.
Eliana, I want to thank you for saying all of that. I absolutely agree. I want to say the same. I think I'm going in my 3rd year over at Jeff, and you can clearly see the school campus, the buildings, and in fact the student body entirely has been neglected dramatically. And I think historically, going back to the 80s and into the late 90s, into 2010, 2014, here we are again. I agree. It feels like this has to be the time when Jefferson moves to the top of the list. And that, as important as all other projects may be, I think historically this community is owed the utmost haste of preparing that school and that campus for a comprehensive high school environment and opportunity.
Thank you. Other thoughts on that? Do people feel largely aligned with that, or are there other opinions?
This is Mike Alexander. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you can, Mike. Thank you.
And Dan, you might have been in the previous group, but yeah, I think there's not only alignment, but there's, Jefferson has historically represented a unique role in the city's educational history, and certainly in the history of service to the African American community, our students, our children, our families. That role is going to be called upon to evolve based on the very shifting demographics in our city and the time that we're in right now. We are at a pivotal moment where we have the opportunity to re-envision not only the role that Jefferson can play in anchoring the educational experience for the children in the district, but particularly centering on African American children and drawing on that history. I mentioned in the previous breakout group that there is an opportunity for the district and the city to bring together not only the work of Portland Public Schools in stabilizing and revitalizing Jefferson, but purposing it to serving almost as the academic hub for a center of Black excellence within the city, to pull together the work of SCI and the Black United Fund and Kairos, so that there is a birth to higher ed or a birth to professional development pathway that is a shared government, Portland Public Schools, city, industry focus, modeling some of the same work that's done by the Harlem School District, like Jeffrey Canada's work in New York City. Once you define the role of this zone in supporting the development of our children in and out of school buildings, in and out of faith communities, in and out of nonprofits, it becomes a collective commitment. And I can't think of a better place to house that zone than Jeff. There's a fabric that can be created by weaving together each of these threads in a very intentional way that can only benefit the children who have most been neglected, but also model what we can do when we actually begin to think about ourselves and these children as assets and not so much have them reflect where we have fallen short. So I think the first step of that concentric circle is making sure that we have an institution that is not only geared and prepared for today, but geared and prepared for the next 25 years. So I can't imagine a better, more pivotal time for this to be a part of a prioritization where we can begin to make the kind of monumental change that won't be viewed as incremental when somebody looks back 5 years from now.
Hi, my name is Mary Merriweather, and in full agreement with what has been spoken. I'm a community member here in North and Northeast Portland all of my life. Have been I was the PTSA president at Jefferson High School back in 2008 through 2013 or so. And we were having these same discussions then. I was actually sat on the advisory board for the redesign when we negotiated and Jefferson became the middle college, just to keep it moving. There's a reason why there's such passion and stake in Jefferson High School, because it is the center of African American pride in our community. It's the school that once was very vibrant, and you go through students that have graduated from Jefferson High School and they're all across the nation contributing in major ways, but also right here in our own city and community, major contributors. And that's why students continue to be attracted, but they're not getting the same experience. And so there's lots of things that we have been neglected. And as the instructor, the teacher spoke before, even the students have really kind of lost confidence that anyone would care, that the district would care enough about them to invest. So they begin to believe the narrative that they see. I want to encourage and challenge our school district and our communities to not just look at investing in schools, but to see that we have opportunities to invest in generations. We have an opportunity to invest not in buildings, we have an opportunity to invest and a mandate to invest in a generation. If we want to see a different outcome, we're seeing it every day played out before us on the news and everything right now. What happens when you don't invest, not in buildings, but in a generation, in people, in students, and specifically now the lights are coming on. Wow, we have neglected Black students. We've neglected Black children. So they've grown up in these areas and in these spaces. We have not opened gateways for them to do better, to learn better. So I want to challenge us. This is a moment right here. I mean, I've been in these meetings, we've been around this block, but we're back here again saying we still believe and are wanting to have confidence. But now maybe you'll hear us. Maybe you'll hear us. But let's not just look at buildings. Let's look at, we have an opportunity by expanding, by creating the kinds of environments that allow children and students to learn and to thrive and to be empowered. I think that's key. Empowered in who they are. So that means we don't limit it to what we think they should be, but we empower them for how they're wired to be. And we invest in a generation. So with all of that said, I am highly expecting and anticipating that Jefferson is high on the priority for the rebuild on this bond. Because I've already sat at the table where we were given the blueprints and everything, and it never happened. And our kids are seeing other schools being built around them. So if we want to see change, let's invest in this generation.
So I think I hear from the last couple of comments. I think a lot of comments are yes, prioritize Jefferson, but I think I'm also hearing a little bit go beyond just that. Not just what we see here in option 3, but go beyond on that. Are there other thoughts or comments about that? Is that a common theme, or is that a priority of this group who's here today?
Dan, there's a few questions in the queue that we might want to get to now that we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Clara asked, option 1, Benson High School completion list as 138 million, and MPG is listed at 75 million, which is on option 2 is reversed, which is correct.
I didn't see that. So the short answer is the total budget for the multiple pathways building is 62 million. And then the remainder, if you will, for Benson is the 138. Looks like maybe some numbers got transposed.
Okay, and there's another comment in here. It said, can option 2 be adjusted to make some things a part of that option, but keep the amount at or around 800 million rather than 1 billion? This means PPS does all of Jeff as a part of 2020 bond measure, but is included in changes. I'm not sure if this person is still here, if they want to further comment.
Yeah, and I take that as a general comment of trade-offs. Is there an opportunity for trade-offs? And the short answer to that is yes, there is. Those are the tough decisions that staff, that leadership, and then the board have to make when they finally decide on a scope of work that will go into a bond package.
Is that working?
As important as we all know roof replacements are, I think you're hearing a lot of emotion around this idea that there's been a kind of a history of neglect in the lower Albina and the Albina community, and specifically in the Black community. And I think to the extent that you link a strategy that has to do with this notion of something programmatic and something powerful in every option is something that is has a nexus to the depth and the breadth of the problem that we're facing as a society. And so I would encourage your leadership to think about how that might be incorporated into all of the options. And this is a time to inspire people, and I think do something bigger than simply buildings, as Miss Merriweather said.
Tom, and I just want to clarify for everyone that these options as they're presented now, this is Director Constam, these options are just a way of thinking about the different components that could go into a bond. It doesn't mean that it's A, B, or C. A final option could be reconstituted in any way, and that's part of what we're doing here tonight is hearing from everybody about what those elements should be.
Thank you.
I know that we may not have a whole lot of time for me to jump in a second time, but I do want to say that my primary motivation for being here is Jefferson High School. It is everything we've already discussed, and coming on, I definitely recognize the internalization of the feeling that maybe the district had left Jefferson behind and has continued to do so. Why should they do something different now? Hearing the specific comments from several official voices at the beginning of this hearing, talking about race, talking about equity, talking about what our role should be, and that it's not just words and it's action. And hearing Ms. Merriweather say that we need to go beyond, I realize that even I've been thinking, well, maybe this is all we can get. But I definitely have changed my mind. I think we absolutely have to go further than what we think we can get. We gotta, and now is the time, and it's got to be the time. And without delay, and without future delay, and without future option to hold off or back off, or maybe we try to close Jeff again or whatever else. Absolutely, this can be the absolute diamond of our district. It can be the peak of high school excellence, and it can be something special for every student in our district to look up to as an opportunity. Or it could be, oh, that's just Jeff, which I don't think it should be. I don't think that's fair. So I appreciate the chance for myself to be able to say that, and the words of others to reiterate that. I wish I had the time to just say more and get more out, but I don't want to be rude.
So this is Julia Brim Edwards on the board, and I wanted to add sort of one thing that is maybe another piece of context. In addition, because there was a discussion about the high schools being sort of first in the larger scope of the long-range facilities plan, but the board 5 or 6 years ago, when they were setting up the bond packages, had two primary filters, and one was the condition of the building, and the second was with a racial equity and social justice lens. And if you look at the remaining high schools, certainly Jefferson being built in 1909 fits that criteria, and the students that they serve. So I don't want that to get lost, that is criteria that is also part of how the district is looking at the package, not just do high schools go first or in what order, but also with the condition of the facilities, which obviously Jefferson is, given its age and the condition, is top of the list.
I wonder if I could jump in, if you could hear me. This is Dean Smith, and I just figured out how to use the Google Rooms. And I wanted to say that as a Southwest resident, a member of the Sweeney Schools Committee, and a member of Ash Creek, that while we obviously love Wilson High School, I think we're very supportive of the need to move forward with Jefferson, as long as there's also a commitment to make a schedule, solid schedule for modernizations of Cleveland and Wilson in the next go-around. So I think that decision has been, if you move in that direction, I think I'd support that. I think the neighborhood would support that, and Sweeney would support it. And I think the shift away from only considering modernizations toward understanding the need for better digital capabilities, both at the enterprise level and the educational level, is critically important. And so I think it's a handsome amount of funding for those benefits, as long as they're equitably shared with all students and all faculty, as well as improving their core technology is included. I think you've made a significant advancement, and you've dealt with at least one of the 3 remaining high school modernizations in this bond measure.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and also your comments, Mr. Knight, Ms. Merriweather, and Mr. Alexander. It's so good to see you here. I'm Michelle DePass, and I'm a school board member and a Northeast Portland resident that attended Jefferson High School in the dance program during the days when you had to live in the district, and I didn't, and so I had to. I moved in with my grandmother, who did own a home in the neighborhood, and I've said this in another group, but I want to say it again. I'm rereading Peter Senge, who's a management expert, and he has 5 disciplines that he talks about in terms of like building an optimal team for moving forward. Those disciplines are systems thinking and mental models and building a shared vision. And the mental model piece is really important in this conversation because we're a district that has not had a lot of people of color at the leadership level. And that what that means is these leaders, as awesome as they are bringing their own mental models, their own assumptions about things, their own lived experience to bear, and have not listened to the voices that we've been listening to for years, for decades. I feel like right now is a time to step back. The youth are talking out in the streets every single night, and we have an opportunity right now to be excellent. And I'm also very competitive. I want to win, like the urban school district. I want to win Portland. We're in the whitest city in this country of its size, and we can be an exemplary model for addressing race and education and the educational gap. That moment is right now. Like there is no better moment. 2 weeks ago wasn't a moment. A month ago wasn't a moment, but right now we have opportunity. We have people listening that have never listened before. We have all kinds of people challenging those mental models. And I hope that what we build as a community with a shared vision includes Jefferson. It includes a notion of Black excellence that we haven't had demonstrated, and we don't have a model of that. Let's create that in Portland. If we can do it in Portland, we can do it in Galveston. We can do it in Florida. We can do it everywhere. Let's do it in Portland. Like, I want to be awesome, you guys. I want to be awesome, and I want to win, whatever that is. I want to win this game.
This is Clara, a student at Cleveland High School, and I definitely agree that we should prioritize Jefferson and do as much as we can for modernization at then Jefferson, and hopefully looking ahead to Cleveland and other schools. I know at Cleveland, the general sentiment is nobody really thinks that the modernization is going to happen. I'm a junior, and I know that it's not going to happen while I'm at the school. But then we're still knowing that we're in a school, and so is Jefferson, and there's a whole list of PPS schools that if the Cascadia earthquake came over 8 magnitude earthquake, then our school would likely collapse. And so just knowing that we're sending thousands of students to school every day in buildings that if the earthquake came, which there is a high likelihood that it could come, then they could all be killed by collapsing school buildings. So I think that is a big motivator as well, just the structural integrity to modernize as many buildings as possible, as well as in other areas like technology. And for equity, then just prioritizing communities like Jefferson that have been without modernization and attention by the district for so long.
This is Dana. I'll jump in as well. Thanks for this opportunity to weigh in. I'm a parent of 2 children, rising second, rising fifth grader in the Cleveland catchment area. And I'm also a Cleveland High School graduate. When I went to Cleveland, it had the most number of different languages spoken at a school of any school in the district in the 90s. Obviously, the neighborhoods feeding to Cleveland have changed dramatically in the last 30 years since I attended. And it wasn't a very functional learning space then. And I understand, having sitting on the planning committee in those really hot and really cold, really cramped rooms there in Cleveland, it hasn't gotten any better. We haven't made those investments yet. I don't want us to wait to renovate Jefferson until the neighborhood is gentrified. We should be renovating it. We should have renovated it in the last bond. We should prioritize renovation in this bond. And I just hope we get ready to make all of the spaces in the district like baseline functional, ideally quality learning spaces.
Dan, there's one comment in here from Director Edwards. Can you speak to the design and planning funds for Cleveland and Wilson? We also are at 7:32, so I don't know, everyone is more than welcome to stay, but the other work groups are beginning right now.
Yeah, I'll answer that question quickly, and then we'll take a minute for transition time. So 2 of the options include funds for planning and design of the high schools that are not included. The construction is not included in the bond option. So what it signifies is the intentionality of moving forward with the design of those schools in anticipation of the next bond that would then include the full construction cost. So allow the high school momentum to continue to move forward for all the high schools. So I very much appreciate everyone's comments. This is super helpful to staff. This is super helpful to the board. It allows us to make a much more informed decision about what a bond would look like going forward. So I thank everyone, and I will let everyone now move to another room if they'd like, and we'll just take a pause and start in just 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to jump right in as people come in and join. Thank you for everyone. I see we got some new faces coming into this room. So thank you for joining us. As you probably heard in the other rooms, but I'll cover it real quick, or if the other rooms worked a little bit differently. There are multiple ways to provide comments. You can always unmute and just speak and let us hear your comments. The Google also has a chat feature if you're able to see it up in the right-hand corner where you can click and then type in a question or comment. Natasha Granis, who is here helping out, she's going to help me monitor that. So if there are comments or questions, we can make sure to catch those. And then the upper left-hand corner, you should see a little person with their hand raised. If you click on that, I will see a little hand raised. And if someone's speaking at the time, we'll wait till the right moment, and then I'll call on you and you can provide your comments. So thank you for joining this group. For those who have been here for the first 2, you're going to hear me do the same intro for the 3rd time, so look at you. We want to do a quick intro, and then really just would love to hear any and everyone's comments about what a future bond could look like for the district. So Portland Public Schools has a long-range plan to modernize and rebuild Portland schools. The best way to comprehensively address outdated school buildings that weren't built for current health and safety codes or modern educational needs is to fully modernize them. 2 previous voter-approved bonds have funded modernization or rebuilding of 6 high schools. Franklin, Grant, and Roosevelt are complete. Benson, Lincoln, and Madison are in progress. In addition, Fabian Pre-K 8 in Northeast Portland was fully rebuilt, and a new Cleveland Middle School in Southeast Portland is under construction and will be open next year. So the big broad question all throughout there, and I'll let people provide their feedback, especially if you've got some ready. What should the PPS Board of Education prioritize as they decide on a proposed bond renewal package for voters to consider? I'll pause. I'm happy to answer questions too. Okay, there is a trend here in these meetings. What I will do is, some of you may have seen, we have a survey out now. We are inviting feedback on 3 potential bond options. So I'll share my screen and I'll walk through those quickly. And that might get some thoughts going about what scope might look like for a future bond. And these aren't the only 3 options. They are simply a small, medium, and larger option that we're using to get feedback. A future bond could be any one of them, could be anything in between, could be smaller, could be larger, could be different. So let me share my screen. And then find the right document, which might be, here we go. Okay, I trust everyone can see my screen. If you can't, someone please yell at me. Here's a document that is on our website that explains some of the options that are being considered for a future bond. In here, there is discussion and it highlights the 3 potential options. This first one here is the smallest at $584 million. All of the options include funds to complete the Benson High School project, and that's both the Benson proper building and the multiple pathways to graduation, which is a new construction building on the Benson campus. So all the options include that. They also all include some level of educational improvements, and what has been prioritized to date are technology improvements in this current virtual learning environment. We've seen and really highlighted the need for technology upgrades throughout the district. Curriculum improvements or curriculum funds that are included. There is a potential here for one big bite of the apple that would really raise up the entire district in aging and outdated curriculum and bring that up to current standards. And in our special ed classrooms, looking at improvements in classrooms throughout the district. Our health and safety projects, roof replacements, that is a big need. We do have leaking and old and deteriorating roofs throughout the district, and we need to address those. Our mechanical systems for people who have been in our buildings in the winter often fail during the winter, and that is a big capital need that we need to address. Security improvements, security upgrades is something that we prioritize. Seismic improvements and accessibility improvements, whether that be ramps into the school or elevators or other ADA accessibility improvements. Option number 2 is similar to option 1. It really just includes in part more of those improvements, more roofs, more mechanical systems, but also includes funds to do the planning and design of the 3 high schools that have yet to be in a bond. So that is Jefferson, Cleveland, and Wilson. So what this signifies is, even though the total amount to complete those projects is not in this bond, the amount to do planning and design is, with the anticipation of the next bond will include the construction funds to complete those projects. And the last and the largest option at $1 billion is very similar to the previous option. It also includes planning and design, but just for Wilson and Cleveland, because it includes the total funds to complete the Jefferson High School project. So that is the one modernization project that would move forward in this bond option. So I'll pause there and ask if there are any visceral reactions or comments, or if there looks to be an option or a scope that seems to be preferred or that should be prioritized as these decisions are made.
Hi, my name is Liz Folderbranch. I am a retired teacher from PPS. I'm also a Jefferson graduate, so selfishly, I would like to see Jefferson prioritize simply because it was a high priority at the beginning of all of these projects and even the last bond, last bond. Anyway, nevertheless, and I don't think putting it off any longer is going to be beneficial, as it also has all of the issues that you were talking about that need to be fixed, like the leaky roof and so on and so forth. So for me, no matter what we do with the bonds, I just would like to see Jefferson prioritized and not put off again. I think even just knowing the high schools, I know Wilson, I also know Cleveland, they've had some work done in more previous years than Jefferson. And I think that they could stand to wait a little bit and maybe go out to that later bond, but I'm not sure Jefferson can continue to wait. Just my preference.
Thank you, Liz. Are there other comments or questions?
Hi, this is Mike Rosen. Dan, I had a question about the pre-development work that might happen on Cleveland and Wilson. And so when the pre-development work is done, that means in the next bond it's ready to build, or is there more construction planning that needs to happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is what the concept is with those funds, is to allocate enough that the projects can really get up to that point of construction. So if a future bond includes the funds for the construction, they can be ready and move right into that phase. So the momentum, this concept of prioritizing high schools, that momentum can continue.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other comments or questions about the options?
There is a comment in the chat. It's from Thomas, but he said, which MPG programs are going to be housed in the new building at Benson?
That is a great question. I feel I'm fearful that I'll miss one or two if I rattle them off, but so I will say the programs that are currently in Benson proper, some of them will stay in the Benson building. The majority of them will move to multiple pathways. Also, the Alliance program will move with the multiple pathways building, and the Alliance at Meek program will leave Meek once construction is complete and move into the multiple pathways building. And Natasha, if you have a moment, maybe you could go on the website. On our website for Benson, there is the plan, and it lays out all the programs. And there's 7 or 8, and I'll just feel bad if I miss one. Maybe we can put the link in there and so you can see exactly what those are, Thomas. Sorry about that.
Yep, I will pull it up. Just give me a few minutes. I'm going to do some searching.
Can I ask an extension of that same question? Was the new building for those programs, which I think is a good idea, an add-on to Benson's original bond, or was it part of, or did it come later? And that's why it's costing more to get Benson done.
That is a great question. The Benson project was a part of the 2017 bond. At that time, it did not include the multiple pathways programs and the multiple pathways building. As we moved through planning of Benson, the need became, very spotlighted that there needed to be a solution for this. So a number of options were looked at of where the multiple pathway programs could go. Long story short, keeping them, some of them with Benson or adjacent to Benson was the best option. So that is what was put forward as a recommendation and ultimately approved and then added on to the Benson project.
Dan?
Yes.
If I could just speak to that. This is Julia Brim-Edwards, a board member. So I came on the board after the bond had passed, but the bond, as my recollection is, it said that the students would move out of the Benson program, but it didn't designate where they would go. So you essentially had the Alliance at Benson students and program, along with a number of other programs that had been cited at Benson without a place to go. So this was the solution after the bond that was developed in concert with the Benson staff and also the staff at all the other programs. But the bond said they're going to move out of the Benson program, but it didn't provide them with a new home. Is that's correct, Dan?
Yes, that is correct.
Got it. I was just wondering, yeah, when did it come up and how did it come up? I know a couple of the programs were already housed in Benson. Is Benson keeping its polytechnic status as well?
Yes, it is.
That's coming from a Benson. I talked to my best friend who went to Benson. So she said, I want them to keep that program. So there you go. My Jefferson, my Benson. There you go.
They are keeping the program, and even as they move to the Marshall campus during construction, they will still keep those programs. Other questions or thoughts or reactions to the bond options, specifically about the modernizations? Is that the right priority for funds, is to focus on prioritizations? Do we have any other thoughts?
Hi, Dan. This is Sandy Ragnetti. I'm a Wilson to-be parent. My daughter just graduated from Robert Gray. So I'm still learning about high schools, but I don't see how option one really gets us anywhere. You know, it delays a lot of stuff that's kind of in the works. I propose, you know, something on par with, you know, option three, if that's, you know, where most of the people land, and it provides, you know, some momentum, especially right now. And I don't see how we can't include Jefferson in the modernization since they've been put off year and year again. So someone that's not associated with Jefferson, I still think that it should be prioritized. So I just want to give that feedback.
Thank you. Are there reactions to the idea of putting the planning and design funds in this bond with the intention of completing that work in a future bond? Does that seem the right way to prioritize funds, or would someone see other work as a higher priority?
This is Mike Rosen, and I'm a former Cleveland parent and board member. I think that's the right thing to do, to put the planning money in, because it creates momentum for those schools. And I think that if they're disappointed that they're not included in this bond, it shows that there's a commitment in the next bond, and then the next bond will be ready to go ahead, which leads me to a quick question. I'm confused about the term of the bond. My understanding is we haven't decided, and maybe this is a question for the board members in the room. My understanding is we haven't decided yet whether it's a 2-year or a 4-year bond. And when will that decision be made, and how will that decision be made?
Dan, were you going to try and answer, or? I mean, I could start off. I mean, first of all, the decision on the size of the package will be decided over the next month. And I think one thing that there is general agreement upon is the rate. The tax rate is not going to change. And so then really the big factor then is how long, if you have the same tax rate and you're raising a greater amount of money, it just takes a longer period of time. sort of the broad general answer. So it depends on where we land on how big of a package it is, and then how long with the existing tax rate it would take to spend and raise that money. Dan, do you want to refine that?
Well, that was very good. And there's also, when we talk about term of bonds, I think it'd be a little bit confusing because we will sometimes, depending on the conversation, use it differently. Largely, when we're talking about it in this context, it means how long until the next bond. And so that doesn't have to be, of course, decided right now. There are multiple variables that could change that. So what we've talked about with most of these options is either a 2 or a 4 year before we go out for another one. It doesn't mean that the work that's in the bond has to be completed in that time. We regularly overlap scope of work with bonds. So it's not how much work we can complete over that duration. It has to do of when do we want to go out, and exactly as Director Brim-Edwards said, the financing. And even the financing of how we finance a bond that is approved in 2020, we don't have to fully decide this year. The financing can change as we sell the bond. So the approval in November gives us authorization to sell a certain amount, but we sell it in increments. And then as we sell it in increments, that's where the decisions are made of how long the term then is of the payback period. So that's getting a little bit messy, but that's also why you'll see these ranges of 2 to 4 years, because there are different variables that can change over time, and we can make different decisions over time. But one of the, I think the important things to point out, as Director Brim-Edwards did, is the tax rate staying constant over time. So if we go into, if we pick a package, we go out in November this year, that's going to stay the same rate whether we go back again in 2 or 4 years. What we'll do is we'll just change how we finance it when we sell those. That seemed very wordy. I don't know if that made sense.
So just to clarify, does that mean that the range is set for the next bond? It's either going to be 2 years or 4 years, or could it be longer than 4 years?
It could be longer. The general thinking right now is that's probably, if there aren't unforeseen circumstances, probably what we would look at as a 2 or a 4 year. But if something changes, it could be 3 years, it could be 5, it could be 6.
Just a quick time check. We have about 7 minutes until the end of our breakout session.
Thank you, Natasha. I wonder, this is, we're in the modernization group, and I think I touched on very lightly that the 3 high schools that have yet to be in a bond, Jefferson, Cleveland, and Wilson, have all gone through a conceptual master planning process. So what we have done here in the last year is met with stakeholders, met with community members to put together what we call a conceptual master plan. And why we call it conceptual is the intent of that effort was to get a general scope of what each of those schools might look like going forward. And then we gave that scope to a professional cost estimator, and then they gave us their estimates for what those are. If one or more of them are, if we have package 3 and Jefferson is included in this bond and it's approved, we will then do a more in-depth outreach process, engage community, engage stakeholders, and finalize what that plan is, which ultimately is approved by the board. And then we move into the design phases with the architect. So I'm curious if anyone in this group has had experience or has maybe seen some of those master plans, and if they have thoughts about what that process is or how they look, or if the district seems to be heading in the right way as far as what these high schools look like, or if there's any other questions or feedback.
I sat on the committee for Jefferson for the conceptual planning, and I thought I liked the process a lot. We sort of pipe dreamed it and it's sort of out there. If we get everything we want, that'd be fantastic. Because it brings a lot of what was Jefferson back to Jefferson. Again, I know that we probably won't get everything that we want, but even if we got just some of the main gritty pieces of making that school work and keeping it alive, which is the hope of everybody that I think was sitting on that committee, teachers, the principal, and the community, then, you know, I like the idea. I like the way they went through the process.
Thank you, Liz. Other thoughts or comments? Well, with our last couple of minutes, I think I'll do a quick wrap up. And since we've been through 3 of these sessions, and this was the session specifically to talk about modernization, I'll just let folks here know that we got a lot of feedback and some very eloquent and impassioned feedback. And what we heard in this group about Jefferson being the priority was very much the sentiment through all of the groups that we heard. I think we heard very little otherwise, maybe a little bit. But that was the clear #1 priority. And then I think something we also heard quite a bit was even the plan we have for Jefferson, that might not even be enough. We might even go bigger, go further, dream bigger about what we can do at that site. So that is a primary takeaway that I heard from today's session. And we'll wrap it up here, but I don't know if anyone wants to react to that, because that seems to be the majority of the feedback that we're hearing here today. Okay, no arm pushing on my end. Oh, yes, go ahead, Sandy.
Hey, I have a question. I was on a different call, and I'm not familiar with the group, but there was an albina plan that was mentioned, and they talked about, you know, centralizing some other services, so like the Children's Museum and some other programs. So is there a possibility of getting funds that aren't from the bond to make that happen, as far as like how much money can outside organizations, companies help in building that? Because that seems more of a community need more than just a school, which I think should always be integrated. But is there a possibility of getting private funds, some way of fundraising, so that it does become that overall larger vision?
Yeah, I'll give a short answer to that, and that is yes. There absolutely is opportunity for the district to partner with outside organizations, to plan, to work on a unifying vision, and then to carry out that vision. A bond is a great way to get capital resources to support a vision. And so we can see it in the built environment, but it's not the only way. There are other ways that components of capital projects can be funded and can be completed. And using our community partners is one great way to do that. It's a great way to leverage funds, and it's a great way to build consensus around a goal and a vision. Okay, I would like to thank everyone for their feedback. This has been super helpful. This is helpful to staff. This is helpful to the board to hear firsthand what community priorities are. And I would encourage people to go on the website and fill out the survey as well. And thank everyone for their time and for their thoughts today.
I have the survey in the chat feature along with what you presented earlier. So if you guys wanted to open that before you leave, please feel free.
Okay, thank you.